Well, hello, good evening, folks, and welcome along to Live at half five, I guess. Still has the same kind of ring to it, I suppose. Um, Here on the Rangers Rabble Podcast, obviously part of the Rabble Network and the Talk Sport Fan Network. My apologies that it's been delayed to this time. One thing I can say for certain is it has nothing to do with myself or Stuart, really. Martin, obviously, unfortunately, is ill today, so that kind of taking him out of the equation. And so the only time we could get this show out was half five because obviously, people have actual jobs. But I am joined by a man that I don't get to be on too many podcasts with these days. Stuart. Stuart, how are you?
I've had better Thursdays. I kind of restless night's sleep last night. I think, Connor. I'm sure I'm probably not the only one after watching last night's game. I think I've probably, as the days went on, chilled out a wee bit. I was frustrated with what we witnessed last night, but I think probably taking a step back, it's maybe not as bad as is being made out in some quarters. Although that doesn't mean that I don't think there's not deserved criticism that should become probably the manager and the team's way for what we saw last night. But like I say, I think maybe some of the criticism and the reaction to it's maybe been a bit OTT because I still think there's a league title to be won there. There's still plenty of football to be played.
I mean, there is. You're absolutely right about that. Plenty of football to play, and just even everyone in the comments, even Raimi, even Shona, Gallant, Tess, Alan Holmes was in, Wallace Rockland, even all. I mean, look, I agree that, I feel as if, firstly, I think last night it is, in my view, Danny Rohl's biggest howler as manager. I think you can put that down to the fact he got it wrong. Now, he didn't himself come out and say that, so he's not quite accepted that that's the case. I guess internally he probably will know. But I think not playing Tor Romans, not playing Scott Wilson, I can't think of a logistical reason why not. Romans has been, the two appearances he's made, he's been brilliant for us. Scott Wilson is coming onto a game. These are two newly minted players that you've brought in the transfer window. Not players either that are necessarily cheap on the books, it has to be said. And of course, Ryan Nadiri, who gets a brace at the weekend, he doesn't start either, and he only comes on with about 10-15 minutes to go. Instead, he starts Chermiti, who's only just coming back from an injury, been out for a couple of weeks. That's not the game you bring Chermiti back in to the start lineup. Even if he had started Miovski, I could have, as much as I still think, why have you pushed so hard to bring Nadiri in here in January to then drop him for the biggest game you've had since he came in the door? But as I say, had he started Miovski, I could maybe have justified it. That's my frustration with last night, Stuart, is he made decisions that, for the first time, I can sit here and say, I do not understand.
Yeah, but I don't think anybody probably agreed with the team selection. I think I was on Monday night, certainly wasn't anywhere close to the team that I was expecting to see. I maybe wasn't expecting all four of the new guys to play, but I certainly expected to see more than just one. I think Nadiri, obviously, Danny Rose had said that something happened following the training session on Tuesday, so didn't feel he could start the game. But so that's fair enough.
Then surely though you start. Sorry to interrupt you, Stuart, but then if that's the case, and that's fair enough, right? Still don't know why Olsen and Romans didn't feature. But if that is the case about Nadiri, 100% get that right, and he's not explained Romans and Olsen. But start Miovski then. I know he's not been brilliant, but he's going to be sharper than Chermiti because he's actually been playing the last couple of weeks. Chermiti hasn't. And to me, you want your sharp, whoever the sharpest striker available, if your main one is injured, that's who you go with. You go with the guy that's been playing. That, and I'm not having a go at Chermiti. I just think it's a wrong game to expect him to come back for the start and start doing things in.
I think my issue comes from it makes the team selection for the Queen's Park game slightly strange, in my opinion, where you're seeing some of those players play lengthy periods of that game against Queen's Park when you know that you then have a double header coming up against Motherwell away and then at home at Hearts. So that does seem slightly strange to me. I then think there's also, I think there's a criticism, and I can't quite believe I'm going to say this, but I'm going to agree with Chris Boyd, because something that he said, Danny Rohl has been very on point about talking it's one game at a time. We're focusing on one game. But after Queen's Park, his pre-match press conference, even the pre-match interview, he's talking about the Motherwell game and the Hearts game almost like combined, as if they were kind of one thing, which seems slightly strange going away from that as one game at a time. We're focusing on the next game. Once that's done, we then move on to the next one. So it's almost as if he's been saying, he's had his head, I've got two teams I need to play here, and that's the way I'm breaking it down, rather than just saying, okay. Now, he's clearly sent the team out last night thinking that team was more than capable enough of beating Motherwell, and that's absolutely fine. And by the way, after 10 minutes, you're probably thinking, well, yeah, there's a chance here to do it. But I think he's got slightly muddled in that approach, and now what we've got to see going forward, there is a maximum of 15 games left between now and what potentially the middle of May if we get to a Scottish Cup final. Yeah. There is no reason why, barring injury, that we start to see the strongest 11 in his eyes and a formation that he believes he wants to settle on that in the majority of those games, because I don't see any reason why these players can't, between now and that time, fit in 15 games. Yeah, look, he's made mistakes. I also think we need to probably shine some light on the players for this. For long and weary on this podcast, I've talked about this Rangers team and some of these players. I can't quite grasp how something like getting that early goal happens, yet it seems to have a knock-on effect to us in terms of we shrink into ourselves, rather than saying, do you know, that's a brilliant goal that we've just scored. We've absolutely ripped Motherwell apart to the extent that Dio is able to run, 50 or 60 yards through the middle of Fir Park. It's the light should actually be getting shone on the Motherwell manager at this point, who, by the way, is getting a lot of praise, and rightly so, but his team have been ripped asunder there. Yeah, it's the only time that we do it. And what did this Rangers side do? They kind of retreat into themselves. They sit back. The tempo absolutely drops out. This Rangers team and this squad are not capable of playing at this slow pedestrian pace where we'll just soak up the pressure and then be able to do it. We're not good enough to do it because things like that late goal happen to us. So the manager needs to take some of the blame. The players absolutely, I think, need to take some of the blame. What I would say to defend Danny Rohl ever so slightly, I think he's got more right than he has got wrong so far. And maybe the criticism that's came after last night, maybe why it's so intensified is because unbelievably he's managed to get us back into a title race from where we all thought we were absolutely gone. We were out of it. So it's probably his own misfortune, really, the fact that he's done such a good job that criticism has intensified. Yeah,
no, absolutely. And just to clarify here, SNP Gunputin, which is a hell of a name. Here we go again, fed up managers getting the blame for the S-bags on the park. Listen, I will be crystal clear on this. Danny Rohl is like every other Rangers manager. As well as he's done, and I agree 100% with everything that Stuart said, he has done a magnificent job since he came in. There is no doubt in that. However, it doesn't make him immune to criticism. It doesn't mean you're not allowed to say, do you know what? He got that wrong. Because you're right. The players in the park need to have a look at themselves as well. There is a mentality issue that seems to seep in to every player that joins Rangers these days. That's a whole culture shift that needs, because to me, I look at it, Stuart, right? And my worry is now, at the end of the season, if we win the league by a point, we'll look at last night's game and go, well, that was some point against a very good Motherwell side. And as much as I accept they're a very good side, Stuart, we made them look like prime Barcelona last night, the way that we were just sitting back. You'd have thought we were in the Nou Camp in a Champions League match, desperate to cling on to whatever we could get because we barely touched the ball. They had 37% possession. We had one spell at the start where we scored that goal, which was magnificent, and then did nothing else for the rest of the game. Chermiti should score, I'll grant you, which, bizarrely, as poor as we had been, we could have been 2-0 up, which is incredible to think. But as good as Motherwell have been this season, the fear that I seen from the players on the park of doing anything, of being over expansive against Motherwell because, but they're a good team, that is unacceptable to me. We haven't won at Fir Park for a couple of years now. Last time we won at Fir Park, I think it was when Fashion Sakala got a hat-trick and we won 6-1, I think it was. That's unacceptable for any Rangers team if you want to win league titles. And those players, some have been here since then, are the ones that need to take responsibility. I do not dispute that fact. But I just feel as if those players have that issue, then don't play those players in that game then. Because to me, I'm looking going, well, what's happened this week is a microcosm of the issue we've got. Hearts, Tuesday night, they scored late to win the game, to take 3 points. Did they play well? No. They were shocking for most of that game. Hibs, much like the way they played against us, how they didn't score, I will never know. But Hearts done what they needed to do and got 3 points. Celtic, again, shocking performance at home against the team at the bottom of the league. 1-0 up, find themselves pegged back, and it takes them a 91st minute winner from a debutant in Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain. The second game in a row, a debutant, a new guy they've just signed, comes in, first match, bang, 3 points. Those two signings have got Celtic 3 points and a Scottish Cup quarter-final immediately. That's impact. And whilst I don't believe that it's sustainable for Martin O'Neill and Celtic to think that they can go the rest of this season winning games in the 90th minute, because eventually a game comes along that you're not going to get that goal, which I'm hoping will be Sunday, obviously. They are finding ways to do it. And then we go from 85 minutes on the clock, Celtic are drawn, we're winning, everything looks rosy. 5 minutes later, they've scored, we've conceded to a Celtic player as well, which just rubs the salt right in the wounds. That's a problem. We found a way to drop points late on against 10 men. At that point, we shouldn't be giving up space against 10 men. And that's where my frustration falls with the players. They have to stand up and go, hold on, that's an unacceptable 3 points to drop from the 2 points to drop from the position you found yourself in, however poor you played in the game.
Well, I think that's probably played into why it probably the disappointment felt a bit more last night in terms of how the other teams, Hearts getting a late winner, Celtic getting a late winner, etc. So I think that's compounded how we're feeling. Rangers don't. I think one of the issues that we do have, and this has been something that has been under Philippe Clement, is that we don't control the ball well enough. We don't dominate games well enough. We don't have large periods where we're in complete control of it. Too many games. So even if you go back to Kilmarnock at Ibrox, they're down to 10 men. We're 1-0 up again very early. Kilmarnock are the better team in that first half with 10 men. Why? Because actually they're using the ball better. They've actually maybe got more of the ball than us. So that is something that absolutely has to change. Rangers need to get to a stage where they're dominating games better. And by dominating, I mean that they have more of the ball, more of the territory, and having the ball in better areas rather than the majority of it being between our two centre-backs and Jack Butland, which seems to be where we spend a lot of the time with the ball. So there's that aspect. I think Tav's post-match was interesting in terms where he mentions, I think we understood that we probably wouldn't have as much possession as Motherwell. Thinking, okay, is that a tactical thing? But if you're already going in with that mindset, I struggle a wee bit with that. And I just think the opening goal showed how you play against this Motherwell side.
Mhm.
And I mentioned in Monday night's pod, something I think this team is absolutely lacking, or we do not get right, is how we press opposition teams. Start of that game last night, we were quite aggressive in how we were pressing their backline. We were, by the way, fair play to them. They still try to play out, but we were forcing, making them play quick. Their goalkeeper was having to go long at times, which then actually suited us. We were able to get the ball back around about the centre circle, etc. But as that game goes, the press just evaporates, goes from nowhere, where the goalkeeper's able just to pass it out to one of the centre halves. They've got time, space to either bring it forward, to then move balls in. They could play passes straight through into the middle of the park at times. So again, there's some tactical things in terms of how we're setting up that it isn't quite right. But I suppose if we can maybe shine a positive on it, it isn't a defeat. And I do think Rangers teams in the past that put in a performance like that probably lose that game. But you're right, against 10 men, we should, I think, probably signal and bringing on Fernandes. I think that just signals something that.
The thing is, though, that changed it a bit as well, though. Even for what we were doing, as poor as it had been, that shifted us to a 3 at the back instead of the 4.
And I think it says to Motherwell, come on, Motherwell.
Come and have a go.
We're one
when,
to sit
do you know
now.
what? If Danny Rohl had just went, right, we're down to 10 men, we'll just stick with the 4 at the back. It's working anyway. We're defending okay. John Stuart, what he was doing last night, I don't know, because he seemed to want to take an age with every ball he had. He was just standing still. Now, we got lucky a couple of times because Masonisi was clumsy and just ran through the back of him. But that happened because he was just standing there as if I don't know what to do here. So these are just things that we can be better. I think one thing about Danny Rohl is I'm sure this will be a learning curve for him. I'm sure. I'm positive that if you replayed that game again tonight, Danny Rohl would not employ the same tactics that he did. The problem is those points are gone. And now, instead of being in a position where we could have went top on Sunday, we're now in a position where we need to beat Hearts in order to make sure we stay in second. Because Celtic have now closed the gap to us to a point with a game in hand. And let's be honest, I don't care what anybody says, that's 3 points in the bag for them sewn up because it's away at Aberdeen. Aberdeen don't take points off Celtic. They don't. They might have beat them in a cup final. That's different. They do not take points off Celtic, so we can forget that. Our best hope is that Kilmarnock maybe do us a favour, but we are going to start that game, which should be first versus second, in all likelihood, third. That's how tight it is. That's how big dropping those points so late on can be. Also, I'm sick of wee twerps like Stevie Welsh walking about laughing his head off, thinking it's great fun. He was laughing last night because he celebrated that for Celtic, not
that should be
Motherwell.
just on a screen, on a loop, in that training centre to show, if look what they're doing. Look, he's laughing at the fans because of how we performed last night. I mean, John Suter, it isn't incredible, by the way, and I've got to give Giga credit because I think his performance levels have massively improved. I thought he was head and shoulders our best player last night. But look at the incident just before the equaliser for them. They put a cross in, Suter's caught under the ball, the boys should score, but Butland saves it. That, to me, at that moment, that's where the switch has to go on to say, right, we've got away with one there. No, it doesn't happen. Within a minute, they've scored. It's ridiculous that, again, we don't, with that reaction in terms of, right, let's get close, let's work harder. I mean, Sterling doesn't get off the ground. First of all, we don't close the ball down. Sterling then doesn't get off the ground, and then Suter amazingly is yards off the guy that he should be close to. So, look, it was frustrating. I know the show title is "Has it been a reality check?" I don't. Maybe it is, but it's like I say. I don't. This isn't terminal. There's still plenty of football, and actually, I think maybe Hearts at Ibrox on Sunday is the perfect game for us
Are we all a
snap
bit
out.
scared? Are we all a bit scared, Stuart, for the fact that we feel like we've been in this movie before? The last few years, there's been a similar theme whereby we start a season poorly, we sack a manager, bring a new manager in by sort of October, November. That new manager gets a bounce, starts to get us in good form. Clement did. He came in. Clement got us to the top of the league. And then it was when we were at the top, we blew it. We lost to Ross County. We drew to Dundee. Unacceptable performances. And then we just started this run of poor performances. And it cost us. And because we've seen that the last few years, I think people, and I think potentially wrongly, but I think people are starting to hit the panic button that, well, wait a minute here. This has happened for the last few years. It looks like it's happening again. We were bogging against Hibs, honking against Motherwell. That's 2 away games in a row. We've stunk the gaff out. That cannot continue. It can't. Because even Kilmarnock, let's be clear, the first half against Kilmarnock was poor against 10 men. We came out in the second half much better side. We looked more like what we want to see for a Rangers team. And then obviously Queen's Park, that was very much, in my opinion, a case of Queen's Park poked the bear last season. And some of the players that were still there were determined this year we were giving them a doing. We weren't going to repeat last season. And that showed it was a wonderful performance. The players that came in the door played well as well. But again, it's Queen's Park. You can't have, we turned up for half a game against 10 men Kelly and Queen's Park, but the other 2 games against big teams, because that's, think about it, 4 points dropped. 4 points that we should be picking up gone because we put in honking performances. And that may be why people are hitting the panic button a bit.
Look, there is absolute scar tissue here. If I can possibly go glass half full, I think we lose some of those games in previous seasons, and that isn't happening. And these points could be vital. Yep, absolutely agree. The performances haven't been great. I think this links into it was a post that came up earlier about whether or not is the fact that we've got players who have been there quite a long term, who have went through this kind of, we're back in it, and then shut the bed basically, and not seen it as that. Could that be something? And I think there is a cultural issue here, which is going to take quite a bit of time to knock out, in terms of, again, the lack of tempo that we sometimes play with, the lack of aggression. There's sometimes a lack of quality. Let's be honest, the amount of times that we turned the ball over, 2 or 3 passes, and then giving it straight back to Motherwell. Next time we get it, it's 3 or 4, and then it's back to Motherwell. Those things need to improve. And I think, yeah, you're right. We've seen this script before, and that is what's making people nervous. I do think we're maybe better equipped, though, to potentially deal with that. But that has to start on Sunday. There has to be a reaction. The crowd will be up for it on Sunday. The players need to react to that. I've said many times, Hearts deserve a lot of credit for the season that they're having.
Yeah.
I think some of the praise that they're getting, again, has been a bit OTT. I don't think they're as good as people are making out. I think recent games have shown that. I watched the Edinburgh Derby the other night. I thought it was 2 poor sides. There was a lot of long ball stuff from Hearts thrown in there, but they got over the line. But I don't think there's anything that we should be saying, do you know what, we cannot beat them on Sunday.
No.
And again, if you win on Sunday, everything changes, doesn't it?
Yes,
the feel good factor, suddenly there'll be a frustration, of course, because we've dropped points from at a late stage in a game. But you're then going, do you know what, we're only 2 points behind them. And then the light then shines on them to say, well, how do they react to that? It's clear that they aren't playing well. They've came there with a chance to potentially knock us out of it, and they haven't. So, and that's the way that the mindset's got to be. We've got to see a reaction, and what we've got to see is what we believe is Danny Rohl's best 11.
Absolutely agree, yeah. And, as is expected on days like this, Stuart, of course, we've had a visitor from the other side. But I'll just remind that person that the team you're slagging us for drawing against would be the same Motherwell team who beat your lot 2-0 the last time you went to Fir Park. So we've been there twice this season and we haven't lost either time, including under Russell Martin at the start of the season. So let's just, be clear. on that. You got bet by Motherwell, we didn't, albeit we taken the chin the fact that we were poor last night, and Motherwell probably would have deserved the win. Two things I want to ask you about, and then we'll quickly finish on Sunday. It's been mentioned a number of times in the comments, and I'm going to bring it up because of that. Stephen McLean's performance last night. Ian T's put the actual question in, but a lot of others have asked about it. And obviously the penalty shout for Chermiti that was seemingly not even looked at, although they say everything is checked, but that one didn't feel like it was checked. But your overall thoughts on Stevie McLean's performance, and was that a penalty kick on Chermiti? Should it have been checked?
Stephen McLean did what Stephen McLean always does and puts in a performance which probably infuriates both sets of fans. Over the piece, there's an inconsistency to him. Quite how he doesn't just show a straight red card for that challenge on Moore is beyond me. Maybe he'll claim the angle he's at, but it looked as clear a day red card, and yet VAR has got to get involved, and thankfully it did. So it was a horrendous tackle on Moore, and I think he's lucky that he's came away unscathed from that. On the penalty incident, it's a penalty, and the reason it's a penalty is because if that foul takes place or that challenge takes place anywhere else on the park, it's given as a foul. And yet what we seem to have in football now is incidents like that. Like I say, if that's centre circle, it's given, but because it happens in the penalty area, well, we can't give a foul because there's also then a consequence to that. I done something that I never do, and I listened to the halftime analysis and the post-match analysis on Sky. We will never find this out, but I would love to know who in the Sky production team sent the message down to the commentators not to even discuss it at the time, for it not to be discussed at halftime and not to be discussed at full time.
It's incredible to me. I could not believe they didn't discuss it, and even more so because there's a parallel that happened this week as well. That happened on Tuesday night. It reminded me of. It was very similar to, not exactly the same, but similar in the challenge. When Newcastle were playing
Spurs,
they got a penalty. That penalty, no, not Spurs. Sorry, the weekend game, Brentford. That was it. Now they went and lost that game, Newcastle, but they got a penalty in that game, and it was a similar sort of situation. The defender, it's not an intentional thing. He's not went into the box and went, "I'm going to do this." But Bruno Guimaraes is in the middle of the box. The ball's played across. He's almost certainly going to score, but he's certainly getting a shot away. The defender trips over his own feet and pulls Guimaraes down with him. He literally, you see him, his hands out because he's tripped, and he's pulled Guimaraes down. And guess what? On the field, wasn't given. VAR said to the referee, "You need to have a look at that because that's a penalty kick," and it was given. A very similar thing. He's caught him, pulled him down, took his legs with him. And then I'm looking at the one last night, which had me thinking it's a bit more close proximity. It's not 100% the same, but it's very close to it. So why is that scenario a penalty in England? But in Scotland, our VAR team, they didn't even check it. There wasn't even not even a cursory mention.
Because, like I say, the commentary team just glossed over it. And what actually happens from that incident is that play goes up the other end of the park and Raskin gets booked. So what you have then is you've got 2 out your 3 centre mids on bookings, even though I would suggest that phase of play for Raskin should never have occurred because it's a penalty.
Well, do you know, funny enough, my head at the time went, "Oh, well, VR are checking that penalty. That could get pulled back," which means that the booking might get, because obviously if he does give a penalty, then the booking would have to be removed because that phase of play
you would say the incident is similar, not exactly, but similar to Diamandi's foul that he got booked for. He's not played the ball, Diamandi. It is a foul. We're not claiming. I think it's a really soft yellow, but it's a foul. So I don't think there's a massive amount of difference between a Motherwell player getting nowhere near the ball. Yes, he might have his eyes on the ball, but he's then just stood on the Rangers player's foot stroke ankle. So he's got to be aware of where the Rangers player is. He just can't just come flying through him. And I had my eye in the ball.
It's in an area where it's not unreasonable to think Chermiti might get something on that because it's near him. And that's the other crucial point, because I've heard justifications in the past about these decisions that, well, it's not given because the ball's not going to go anywhere near him. I still think that's wrong, but I can maybe understand that as a justification. But Chermiti has every chance of getting on the end of that ball if he isn't brought down. So I just think it's a poor decision. Whether it'll get mentioned in the VAR show, I don't know. I would like to hear what the conversation was between Stephen McLean and John Beaton, because it will have been mentioned, because Chermiti went down. So McLean would have had to have mentioned to John Beaton as his protocol, because, what have you seen there?
He didn't bother dealing with Chermiti. He just stood where the foul was. So it seems to me that they'd very quickly made up their mind about it and moved on. So, look, at the end of the day, that plays a part in the game, but Rangers need to be better. It's as simple as that. Can I just mention, what do you think about the criticism of Gassama at the moment?
Well, I think some of it is merited. I think some of it goes over the top. I think for me, he's a frustrating player. I think Gassama does have something, and I think what we're seeing is exactly what we were told we were going to see. People seem to forget Sheffield Wednesday fans told us when we signed him in the summer, he's quite good in big games, but he disappears. He disappears in the weekly bread and butter games. And last night was a big game, but it was also a league game, and he disappeared. I didn't feel like he had an awful lot, to be fair to him. There wasn't an awful lot of service going forward. Most of our play was at the back because we were defending for most of the game. We were, far too deep, and we weren't getting interfaces. Even when the ball was being cleared for set pieces, or when we were getting ready from a defensive point of view, there was no real outball because everybody's in our half. So I can understand why it would be easy for him to be floating out the game because nothing's coming to him. However, he's got to do better to make things happen himself. You've got to still get involved. Roll your sleeves up and dig in, because you're not always going to get the kind of game he prefers where it's nice, free flowing, you can just run and do what you want. He also needs to stop when he gets into positions, Stuart, try to skin players 2 and 3 times. Even if you skinned them once, that's enough. You don't need to do it again. I think that's just a naivety, though. What I was going to ask you, though, before we finally close on Hearts, because I found it interesting, and I can't remember if the guys mentioned it last night, but Jens Berthel Askew, Motherwell's manager, had a bit of criticism for Rangers last night. Ironically enough, right, especially for Motherwell, when you know their history over the years, but for any Scottish team, he was complaining about Rangers' physicality last night. He was saying that, for him, that game is probably the best game that you can put on paper just now in Scottish football to Motherwell and Rangers. Probably not wrong. 2 best defences statistically. 2 teams who are coming into it in fairly decent form. So he's saying, it's the best game you could put on paper, but at times the approach in terms of the amount of fouls that were committed, he felt we should have had more bookings for the fouls we had committed, and he felt that sort of, dented the spectacle that the game should have been, and that there would have been more goals if we weren't fouling so much. You're basically accusing us of being hammer throwers when that's been their game until he came in the door.
I actually thought he kind of let himself down a wee bit with his post-match. He didn't deny that it was a red card, but he tried to defend his player, which I think sometimes you just need to admit at times that your player's got that horribly wrong. He was nowhere near the ball. It's a horrendous tackle. He should have just been straight off, as I said before. McLean should just be given a red card for that. To then state after that, and there were other fouls nearly as bad as that in the game, is just utter nonsense. Utter nonsense. Actually, the second worst foul in the game was Masharishi, who'd put his studs down the back of Suter's Achilles in the first half. And didn't get booking. It was McLean gave a foul, but no booking on it. That was the second worst tackle in the game. I don't think the pitch helped, by the way, because there was a lot of times where 3 or 4 players were kind of colliding into each other because the ball was kind of getting stuck. I don't think it was a dirty game in any way. I think he's Slattery, I think. I think he can count himself lucky that, he didn't get a booking. I think a few other players committed cynical fouls at times. Worse than, I would say, cynical than compared to Dio's. Didn't get a yellow card. So, I think he could be very proud of how his team played last night. I thought that criticism or that view in the game was wrong. I don't.
By the way, I
see
thought
that.
McGinn was lucky to escape a booking as well.
Uh-huh.
Because McGinn has a flailing arm and he pokes Chermiti square in the eye. I mean, it's a sore one to take. And if you've ever been poked in the eye, people say to me, "Oh, he's a big lad. Why is he going to do like that?" If you've ever been poked in the eye, you know why he's going to do like that, because it's not a nice feeling.
That can happen.
I'm not saying he didn't mean to do it. What I'm saying is, in my view, on another day, that could be deemed as a reckless action because he doesn't have any need to have his arms flailing out like that. Like, feeling about with that for balance, 100% football players do it. But it's the whole, why are you away up here at head height? That's so. I'm not saying that's a bad decision. I'm just saying on another day he might have found himself in the end of a booking.
I thought it was a strange, I think he just kind of lost the plot a wee bit. I think he should have just concentrated on his team's performance, and accept the fact that one of his players committed one of the worst tackles that we've seen this season. And that's the end of it. What is interesting for me, and by the way, this is a criticism of Rangers here, why we felt the need to be time wasting, goal kicks and throw-ins, etc.
Time wasting half an hour to go.
Tempo down. But what is interesting in that is, as someone who's sat at Ibrox for the best part of 20 years and watched week in, week out teams time wasting from the third minute, that it is interesting McLean decided to get his card out for time wasting, what was it, in the 60-odd minute? So it is possible that yellow cards can be given, and you would like to see the next time that Stephen McLean and whoever else is refereeing at Ibrox between now and the end of the season, that they take action far sooner than I think I could probably count in one hand the number of times I've seen a booking for time wasting before the 80th minute at Ibrox. So it's good to know that that is possible. But Rangers, why are you doing that? Is
here's the thing.
Another thing I'd be asking.
We're now in a position, and at the end of the day, the game last night's been dissected. It is what it is. We need to just, I think, focus away from it and think, right, let's put an exclamation point on it and see what worth that point has at the end of the season. Because for me, and there'll be a lot of people thinking the same as S&P Wimbledon here, saying if we don't beat Hearts, we can kiss the league goodbye. I'm not sure I'd go as far as that because there's a long way to go. I think, though, the next two games before we play Celtic on the 1st of March are huge. Because to me, if you win both those games and you go into that game with Celtic levelling points or still a point ahead of them, which we would be if we win them, whatever they do, even if they win, you can then create a gap between you and Celtic again and start to focus once again on catching Hearts. If, however, you don't, and bear in mind, after the Hearts game, I don't care that at the bottom of the league, we're away to Livingston. That's never an enjoyable place to go. It's difficult, and some of these guys that we brought in, by the way, I think Nadiri would be perfect for that, because playing in the German third division, he's played on plastic pitches, let me tell you. So he that won't intimidate him. But to me, Hearts, vital. Win that, and then focus on Livingston before you've got to deal with Celtic. But is it a league title ender if we don't win it?
I'm not sure it is. I think it's how it knocks us. I think it could be, what does that do for the mentality of the squad, etc. What does it do to the fan base, where there was a kind of optimism? I think we can beat Hearts on Sunday. I've got absolutely no doubt about it. I've been old enough to remember, the title run-ins that we've had in the past. My God, there were times where there was 3-4 games to go and you thought you were out of it, yet you ended up winning a league title. So with 12 games to go, there is plenty of twists and turns to come in this. And I think what gives you the confidence potentially is there's maybe been title run-ins in the past where you've maybe looked at, say, a Celtic and thought, where are they going to drop points? Where is the slip up coming from? Whereas I think you look at both Celtic and Hearts, and particularly how they're playing, and if one of them goes on and wins the next 12, 13 games, well, fair dues to them if they go on a run like that. But I'd probably put a wager on that they're not going to do that. So I think there's slip-ups to come. What Rangers need to do is try over the next, like, say, 4 games or so, can they start another run? What, like we'd just done, towards the tail end of last year into January, put a run together that just forces pressure, etc. That's going to be, we need to look after ourselves. I put something in our group chat a few weeks back, 16 games to go. How many of those do we need to win the title? Nobody said 16. Nobody was of the belief that we'd probably go undefeated during that period. So we are seeing us drop points. I think that there was an expectation that might happen. But if
the thing is, though, it's draws that kill us this season, though. We look back at the end of the season.
10 draws is far too much.
Celtic have lost 3 times the amount of games we have. Yeah. Incredibly, despite how poor we were under us, Martin, we've only lost twice. Yep. We've drawn now 9 games. That's killing us. That's what's keeping Celtic. And they should be in the dust. You lose 6 games, they should be in the dust behind us and Hearts. They should be nowhere near us. Again, Hearts have lost 4 games, I think it is, compared to our 2. And you're looking going, well, how can we have... And again, it's all the draws. It's not getting over the line in games like last night. And that's where we need to get better. And listen, Sunday's not going to be a cakewalk, in my opinion. It's going to be a hard game. But we're at home, we're at Ibrox. Get the crowd behind you. Go out there and show Hearts that you mean business. Show Celtic you mean business. Because whatever happens at Rugby Park, and hopefully our good pals Neil McCann and Billy Dodds will do us a wee favour, which wouldn't surprise me because they're in decent form, you make sure you win. And by the way, look at the run between now and the Old Firm. We've got 2 games to play. We've got a nice break. We've got Hearts then, we've got Livingston. Celtic need to play 4 before then, because they've got 2 legs with Stuttgart in between games against Kilmarnock away and Hibs at home. Hibs will probably Hibs it. They like to help. I mean, Hibs this season have taken points off Hearts, they've taken points off us. Conveniently, not taking points off Celtic. I'm not saying that there's anything to that, but they are cousins. Kissing cousins, some would say, but they are cousins.
We just need to do our job.
We just need to do our job, yeah.
We are still in a position where it's in our hands, Connor, and that's the most important thing at this point. But I think the fans need to see some sort of reaction, like say an aggression, better quality, play at a tempo on Sunday. I think the fans will get behind that. I think you're right. Ibrox will be rocking on Sunday. So it's still all to play for. We've had a blip, and I think there's right to the big criticism, but it's done now. And I think now we need to get behind the team and the manager and all eyes on Sunday.
I knew I was on mute there. Do you know, as soon as I said that, I knew I was on mute. I agree, 100%. Right, that'll do us for live at 5:30. I'm not sure, because Martin has not said. I don't think we have any other shows scheduled for this evening. We might do. I don't know if there's going to be a Hightower Hijacks Thursday instead of Wednesday, or I have no idea. There might be something. Keep an eye on the socials and in the Discord and stuff if you're in there, and you'll obviously find out if there is to be another show. If there is going to be one, it will probably be the next couple of hours. So keep an eye out, but I don't know. As I say, Martin has not bequeathed me with that information. Stuart, pleasure to be on me. As I say, I don't get to be on me very often, so it's nice to actually be on me.
Absolutely. Good to chat.
Yes, let's all hope that Sunday brings us happier times and we can draw a line under the sand of Fir Park and thank our lucky stars we don't need to go back there again this season. Enjoy what's left of your Thursday night, and we will see you very, very soon.